legal advice has been paywalled. You need to know a lawyer, you need to pay a lawyer, to get legal advice. And I think the end of those days are here. Anybody can GC AI a question and get a legal answer. I don't need to wait for my lawyer to call me back. How I apply that to this business and these people will be the secret sauce.
Welcome back to CZ and Friends, where we talk with legal leaders, technologists, and operators shaping how modern companies work and scale. I'm your host, Cecilia Ziniti. Today, I'm joined by Danielle Sheer. She's the Chief Trust Officer and Chief Legal and Compliance Officer at Commvault, a global leader in data protection and cyber resilience. Danielle also serves on the board of Manhattan Associates, a public supply chain technology company, and on the trustee advisory board of Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center, a major teaching hospital affiliated with Harvard Medical School. Across these roles, Danielle has become a leading voice on enterprise risk, cybersecurity, leadership, scale, and responsible growth. She's also one of the most relatable AI adoption stories I've heard this year. And Danielle and I go way back, literally Tech GC, now L Suite. I think I've known Danielle for about 10 or 15 years, and it's been so much fun for our careers and lives to grow together. I've always admired her, heard her speak on careers at Tech GC maybe 12 years ago, came up to her, and now here we are. We've got a public company board member, and I guess I'm lucky I'm a CEO now. But in any event, it's been really fun to be friends with Danielle, and I'm so delighted to have her on the podcast. She began as a skeptic on AI, so we'll dive into that. Now she's a thoughtful and active user of AI. So let's dive in. Danielle, welcome to the show.
I am so excited to be here. That was a great introduction.
All right, let's go. So your title at Commvault in that intro stands out that it has the word trust in it. I haven't heard that before. Maybe I have, but it's certainly not common. How do you think about trust in your role and then at large?
First heard that title used by the Adobe General Counsel. And I had read an article probably at this point 12, almost 15 years ago. And I heard that the Adobe Chief Legal Officer had taken on this title of Chief Trust Officer. And what I liked about it was two things. Number one, it enabled the portfolio under a general counsel to grow outside of just legal. And as compliance and security and other areas of the business naturally tap into skills that lawyers develop over time, I thought that was very interesting. And two, it's because when a lawyer enters a room, a lot of people kind of clench up. It adds a layer of stress into the energy of a place. And I did try for many years at the beginning of my career to go on a campaign to change how the world felt about lawyers. I lost. I was able to change how the people in my immediate vicinity felt about me. I was able to build trust. But, when somebody brings along their lawyer, it's not something that immediately builds trust with everybody else in the room. And yet you have this position that is an enabler, that is an activator, that is an executor. And I think we could be doing better for our chief legal officers. That's just how I feel.
No, it's fascinating because now on the executive side, when I had a situation with a dispute with a supplier, and I added my lawyer thinking like, oh hey, plus lawyer, and it immediately went south, like just dropped like a rock.
Escalate.
And it wasn't, it was escalated. And I didn't mean it really that way. And it was just a good lesson for me because I think, okay, we're a legal AI company. People are pretty used to lawyers. We have in our brand, I think we do align with folks like you, partly because we do see legal as the force multiplier, particularly in house. Like that's something that we focused a lot on. Okay, so you go on this campaign and you find, you join meetings as the lawyer and people are like, or something happens. You're able to be the change you see in the world and you're gonna change the brand. What was the thinking and did it work?
Well, we have any number of security incidents that we have to deal with through the supply chain, right? When any one of our vendors experiences a security incident, we've got to talk about it, we've got to handle it, we've got to remediate it, and we have to communicate it. If I have to communicate something to you as the CEO of GCAI, would you want to hear from the general counsel or the chief trust officer?
Good point. Yes,
Right?
that's right.
So I feel like we've been doing our legal teams in-house a disservice by not giving them the right title to open up sort of feelings and emotions in people when they come to the table. An in-house lawyer is not a firm lawyer. An in-house lawyer is not a litigator. An in-house lawyer is not somebody who goes to court. Not all lawyers are created equal, and the roles aren't equal. And so the question is does it work? It works brilliantly. I have this portfolio now: legal, expanded to compliance, expanded to cybersecurity, expanded to business development. And what's interesting is it's changed the way I think as a leader. Instead of leading with the legal analysis, I lead with the business goal. What are we trying to accomplish? Legal becomes an input into that, but there are so many other inputs, and I'm no longer think myopically about the legal input. I think much more about what we're trying to accomplish. And then it's my job to assess risk and regulations and speed to success and how it's going to be compatible with other teams, how it's going to be compatible with customers. You think about it all. I actually think having a chief trust officer on an executive team, and it doesn't always have to come from the chief legal officer's role, although I think we're uniquely situated to kind of take on this role, helps strengthen an executive team. It helps strengthen the motion that all of us go through together and to reach shared goals.
How does that show up in a crisis if you've had one? And maybe it's been at this company, maybe at others, but like we had a guest, we had Diane Honda of Redis, who I also super admire and similarly has taken on additional roles from legal. She talked about having literally like a dissenting chair in the room and that helping in a crisis in particular. That was her strategy. So, what's yours, or how does this trust concept of like thinking about the wider business and really like in your case your company's selling security services, so trust is what you're selling really, so how does that show up?
So let me give a really simple example. Let's say that a key leader in the business resigns, and that can affect a team, and a lot of people are going to have a lot of feelings about that. And let's say it can be a key leader in sales and support and marketing, whatever it is. The executive team comes together, we hear the news, and who on the team is thinking about what do we want to be known for on the other side of this? How do we want to exit this person? What do we want to say to the people who are still here? What do we want that succession plan to look like? How do we want to get to the other side of this? Now, as the head of HR, you're thinking about exiting somebody, you're thinking about a backfill. Legal, you're thinking about were any contracts violated? Are they going to a competitor? The function whose role is leaving is thinking, what am I going to do? Probably the other executives in the room are thinking, thank God it's not me, but now who am I going to rely on? What I find interesting is that instead of showing up with the legal hat to say, let me look at the non-competes and the non-solicits and all that stuff, you sort of take a step back and you're like, okay, we should make sure. This is just sort of my philosophy, but I add this into the team. Listen, life is a long song. We've had a lot of people leave and come back. We've had to cut people when we haven't necessarily wanted to, or that's been a hard decision to make. Let's make sure that anybody who leaves with our gratitude and our blessing, right? That's number one. Number two, do we have an internal candidate? Jar, yes, we do. Or should we go outside? Is there another skill set we want here? And like, whose role is it to put all of those pieces together and to be thinking at all times, how do I make this team come on the other side of this stronger? Because everybody has a my part works in this example, but who's thinking about who are we going to be on the other side of this? So almost every crisis or goal that we want to achieve, because it works just as well for goals, I'm thinking, who do we want to be on the other side of this? And how do we get there? How do we get there together? How do we get there by strengthening trust and not by breaking trust with each other, with our employees, with our customers, with our board?
That example gave me the chills. The like life is a long song. I think, there's variants I've heard across this. Naval, I read a lot of this kind of Twitter sort of inspo stuff. He talks about play long-term games. Like that's just literally the name, and that it will pay off in business in a tremendous way. And that's a great example because I've been the HR side, I've been the legal side, now the CEO of that exact scenario. And of course it happens at every company. That's life. And thinking about like there's stress in the moment, right? It's like, oh, the stock options, the exercise window, and then this and then that. And it's very easy to not see that big picture. Wow, that I did not expect that truth bomb this morning, Danielle. Amazing. I love it. All right. So how does that translate to the board level? So you're on the board of a major nonprofit and of a public company. Have these board roles affected your view of this?
It has, sitting on boards, and the latest one, Manhattan Associates, has transcended me as a leader. It's very difficult to ask somebody to do two things at the same time. Number one, tell me how you do your job successfully. And number two, tell it to me in a way that I should care about. Those are two very difficult things to do at the same time. When I show up as the chief trust officer and report out on my function, I try very hard not to like justify your existence presentations. I absolutely hate them, right? Nobody needs a book report on everything that I've done in the last quarter. But it's hard. It's hard to get yourself out of that mindset because there's so much information you want to get across to a board that you only get to see 4 or 5 times a year. Sitting on a board and a public company board and one in the supply chain, I have a better appreciation for, you know, first of all, tell me the end of the story first. And two, tell me what matters. So let's take cybersecurity, for example. It's a big topic for a supply chain company. We have conversations about enterprise risk. We have conversations about, how can we help the board members understand what the enterprise risk management program is and how that feeds into the cybersecurity program. And you can imagine, because I know you have sat in conversations where you're talking about how somebody creates their enterprise risk management program, runs it, explains it, communicates it. You know what actually matters to board members? What are the 3 to 5 systems that if they go down, we're not in business? What are they? In your entire company. Can you survive without Outlook? Probably, right? You could probably survive. It's not easy, but you could probably. I remember being at Carbonite and the internet went out. I don't know. I think there was like like at the company, and we all moved to the Marriott next door and popped open our laptops and got on the free Wi-Fi at the Prudential. Like, what has to be totally down for you to be out of business? Tell me the 3, 4, or 5 things. It's a really hard question to ask. At GC, what has to go down for you to be out of business? What are those things? And now tell me, what's your backup plan? What's your spare tire? How do you spin those things up while you're handling the remediation of like what happened? That's what boards want to know. So think about a supply chain company like Manhattan Associates. They make sure, we're headed into Christmas season, right? Holiday season. They have vendors all over the world shipping gifts and clothes and electronics, and they have warehouse management system. If something goes down and those gifts don't arrive on time, what are those things? And how do you have a spare tire to keep things up and running while you're figuring out what went wrong and you're remediating it? That's what boards want to know. They don't want to understand what your checklist is. They're not interested in like the big loaded words that make it sound as if you know what you're talking about when it comes to enterprise risk management. If you sit on the board of a travel company, or let's just say like an airline, what keeps our planes grounded? What are the things that would keep our planes grounded? And what is our backstop if that happens? And I just think about it like running my house. I live in Massachusetts. We get storms. I hear this winter's going to be bad. What happens if the electric goes out? What do I do? Where am I going to go? What's my fail safe? It's interesting that nobody wants to think about that. That's hard, right? Because then you have to spend a little bit of money for, to address a headache that hasn't become a reality yet. But that's sort of why you have a chief trust officer. Now, I am not planning what the backstops are for each tool in each system because that has to live in support. It has to live in finance. It has to live in cybersecurity. But I'm asking the question. I'm connecting it all, creating a comprehensive narrative that then I can go to a board of directors and say, here's where things get really spicy, and here's our plan for what we're going to do about it. And so as I have come to this realization as a board member more than I have as a sitting executive. And so now as a board member, it's very easy to cut through all that noise and ask a Sesame Street simple question. The answer, incredibly difficult, but tell it to me like I'm 5, right? What systems have to go down where we are in a bad situation? And what's your plan to do something about it? Because you shouldn't be figuring out the plan at a moment of crisis.
Yes, that is a resounding theme. So, love how you put that. The spare tire example is a really good one because I do think there is an excessive energy in writing and kind of like almost like I felt this way a little bit with GDPR, where it was like you have the manifest and the kind of like, you know, it has been called compliance theater. But this question of like, do you have a spare tire in your actual trunk? Like that is very tangible and very clear. So, like this morning, literally the Cloudflare outage is happening as we speak. And it's like, half the internet is down. Obviously, OpenAI goes down in our case. We've got fail safes. We're able to hot swap models. We're able to hot swap other things. And, just really thinking like it's funny because I've had this realization recently of like that you mentioned the household example that running a company, it's the complexity of a household, right? Of like, oh, did you remember the passports? Oh, did you do this? Did you like, like when the kid, the babies are little and you've got your diaper bag, this is like every possible eventuality is like taken care of. But thinking of like taking care of it, where it's actually, I think this is something that a number of guests on the show talked about is like this idea that when legal and trust are running well, it's not crisis laden. It's not you're coming in and saving the day. It's that you've been doing it the whole time, asking the questions and so on, so that when you need the spare tire, it's like, all right, call AAA, or you just do it yourself. And it's like you experience a disruption, but far less than you otherwise would have. So yeah, that's
Yeah, you
great.
build resilience in the organization. You build resilience in the organization, you build resilience in the team, you build resilience in people.
Love that. Such a good story too. I'm having so much fun. All right, turning point. Let's go to my next favorite topic, which is AI. So I'm going to say your AI story is refreshing and obviously different point of view than me, and that's great. That's why I have you on the pod. So a year and a half ago, we looked this up. We did the research notes. You're at an L Suite event, and you literally said AI is not a thing. You said not a thing. So this is what is this? Now it's 25. So this must have been, I guess, 23. Or early 2024. So you weren't interested. What led you to that conclusion then, and what has changed?
Yeah. So, I really, my personality does not get on hype cycle bandwagons. And I am immediately suspicious of it. And I needed to work out why I was suspicious of it. AI is a tool. It's a tool. When companies started saying, how are we going to use more AI? How are we going to sell AI? How are we going to make money with AI? We're going to be left behind if we don't, use AI. It was like nails on a chalkboard to me because that is the wrong question to be asking. I needed to sit with people I trusted and hear repeatedly, what problem are we solving? And is AI a new tool that can help us solve it? And you and I spent a lot of time talking about this, and it helped me work things out in my mind. It's not that I don't think AI is a thing. It's like that would be like saying electricity isn't a thing and I only use candles, right? Obviously, like AI is a really awesome technology. But you know what I don't want to do? I don't want to talk about how AI is going to replace humans, how AI is going to take people's jobs. Like we're firing hundreds of thousands of people all over the world because now we're introducing it with a bot. Like that to me, I'm very opposed to. I don't think that's helpful. I certainly don't think it's helpful as we usher in a completely new technological innovation in our lives. I think AI is very powerful, and I still think it has a long way to go to build in safeguards so that we get the best use out of it without it causing harm. And I worry mostly that companies are rushing to develop, use whatever AI because they see it as a moment of like a gold rush moment. And, we had a little bit of that problem when electricity was invented. Every home in the US was wired, for electricity. You know what happened? A bunch of homes went up in flames because we didn't have a code that, people who understood how to wire buildings could live by. That code was ultimately created. We have this problem in technology where we're so fast to develop it and everybody is so fast to get rich as a result that we don't think about the safeguards we need to build into it. And so that's sort of my hesitation when it comes to AI, which is let's tread carefully. Let's go slow to go fast. So I know you. I have long been a fan of who you are as a leader and as a thinker. And so I said, let's check out this GCAI tool that is being built. And I find it fascinating. You know what I love about it is that it helps me overcome a blank page. And it you know, gives me sort of a heads up on what the customer perspective could be when I am so rooted in my own way of thinking. So I actually, before I moved over into GCAI, I used ChatGPT. I really forced myself to use ChatGPT. And I like it. I actually use ChatGPT like every day now. I am careful. I make sure that I turn off the prompt that talks to me like a human. I'm not interested in having my emotions toyed with, right? I'm careful, but I like it. And then I was like, you know what would be really helpful is if there was an entire universe that was like ChatGPT, but built for and made for legal world and the compliance world, GCAI. And it's great because it gives me the tone, the tenor, the reliability, the credibility of, an LLM that was created by and for lawyers.
So would you say you're an optimist now on AI?
Cautious. I'm a cautious optimist. Um, I read these articles about how, like, I don't know if they're true, by the way, because that's interesting, but like how robots are going to start cleaning houses and cooking and like driving kids and whatnot. And this is just a philosophical point of view. I like to take care of my family. Like, I like to cook dinner. I like to drive my kids to school because that's when they talk to me. If AI is going to replace all the mundane things that I do in my life to raise a family, what is the point of living? I don't want that. Now, do I want to have 10,000 candles in my house because I don't have electricity? No. So like I think there's a point that AI can help all of us up level. One of the things I like to say to my team as I'm growing them, and it was said to me as people were growing me, is write down everything you do in a week, like stream of consciousness. Find a way to give 80% of it away. That's how you teach the next generation. Okay, well, Danielle, what am I supposed to do with everything I just gave away? You know what you're supposed to do? You're supposed to figure it out because that's what growth is. Figure out a way to add value to the company, to the team, to your life, but you have to create the space to figure that out. And what I think AI does is it creates space. It creates space for me to ask myself the really hard questions like, what value am I going to bring with this free time that I don't now need to spend 12 hours researching a subject? And you know what it does? You know what time it helps me develop? This is really crazy. Building relationships. I have more time to build relationships because now I have the answer quicker. I've looked at it from like a 360-degree perspective. I really love to ask questions like, somebody who doesn't agree with this, what would their arguments be? I mean, like, how great is that? And then you read it, you digest it, you give yourself a moment, you turn back to it, and you're like, all right, now I'm going to make a plan. I want to influence these three leaders. And that doesn't take showing up with like an amazing argument. It takes having a relationship with those people where they trust you. They trust you enough to say, I don't agree, let's talk about it, or okay, let's give it a shot. But AI can't solve that.
No, I love that. And that's exactly like, I mean, this is like the third time this episode that you've given me the chills. But in any event, that story of using AI, like in an AI world, the relationships part matters more. But interestingly, you can use the AI to make the relationships part better. So, perfect example. I was on a panel last week at the GCC East Conference, and a leader from a company called Acorns talked about how she was basically able to, there was a product counseling issue where a BD person at the company wanted to do a kind of unusual deal with a regulated industry. And GC hears about it the night before, or the product counsel hears about it the night before. And they're able to use AI to do exactly what you described, which is like, okay, here's the considerations, here's the regulation that's probably going to come up. And by the way, here's four alternative deal structures that could actually achieve what you're trying to achieve. And so this BD person who had said, oh, hey, I looked on ChatGPT myself, legal was able to actually say, like, okay, actually, let's widen the aperture here a little bit. Let's think about how to get this deal done. Did that. And it was literally like this BD person was like, how did you do that? Legal, this is incredible. And the deal's going to get done. And it was like this beautiful story of literally exactly what you said, where it's like, okay, you've got the headspace now to go a click deeper, to be more effective, to think about the dynamics that are kind of how we kicked off the show, right? Of like, okay, the regulation, let's assume now that with AI, anybody can look at the regulation. Okay, so like, what is that next thing that you're going to do?
Exactly.
And
Yeah. I had this executive coach years ago, and when she said this to me, I really resented it. Uh, and you've probably heard me speak about this. She would say, Danielle, you are going to have to figure out whether you want to be right or you want to be effective. And when she said that to me, I was really irritated and I was like, I want to be both. And she's like, great, but there will be times you have to choose. And this, I think, is the point of AI. AI, for the most part, let's just assume that it can be right. What it can't be is effective. So it frees up time for humans to figure out how to be effective. it gets you to water, right? But it can't force you to drink.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, and it's literally to the point where, even something super unrelated, very early in the company, I did a panel with the American Association of Marriage Lawyers. Okay. So I know very little about marriage law or divorce law. I don't think I could know less effectively. Like I know California's community property, but that is like the end of my marriage law knowledge. All right. And we're prepping for this panel on AI, and I talked with the practitioners there, and basically they explained to me that in Southern California and Northern California, divorce practices and the amount that people go to court versus settle or do mediation is very different. And I was like, "Oh, that's interesting. Why is that? It's the same state law. There should be no reason for that." And it turned out the answer was that in Southern California, because of Hollywood, high stakes divorces, it's all about the image and who goes to court first and kind of this like control
Higher, probably.
story, right? Exactly. Versus in Silicon Valley, it's the stock options. It's confusing math. It's like this whole thing where it's like we need a mediator to like look at cap tables and look at, the fair market value and this whole thing. And that is something that maybe AI could figure that out, but on the rightness of like what is the right thing to do here? Is it to settle? Is it to go with a mediator? Is it to whatever? Like that experience and that humanity, literally one of the most human things you can do, like people's marriage, was like, okay, these guys' jobs are pretty much safe. And so, yeah, just
You
fast.
reminded me of like, you remember when we were baby lawyers and even like baby in-house lawyers and like the reason why we gave the advice we did is it's because like it's the law. Like I would be like, that was the law. That is the law. These leaders would look at me and be like, I don't care. This is what I want to do. And so it's like it can help you get to the answer really, really fast, but it cannot help you be influential. I mean,
Yes,
like
exactly.
it can help but like you still gotta show up.
You got exactly right. And I think I love to I'm part of me, I'm like, I wanna ask your exec coach to put it in the show notes, but I'm like, this person can get deluged because that is like absolutely outstanding advice. But I can literally I can feel like I have this empathy of like sitting there and having somebody tell you this and you're like, "Grr," like
Yeah.
I feel it. All right. So leading through change. So you've done acquisitions, you've had cybersecurity events, you've been part of a public company, lots of change. That's obviously a constant. Where do you anchor in times of change?
This is my favorite question, and I do not get it often enough. Communication and transparency. You know what shocks me? When something is happening and it's significant enough that it's going to affect people's lives, and we decide we're going to keep the information close to the vest. We're going to only let a few people know. And then, like, a few people let a few people know, and a few people let a few people know. You know what? By the time three people know, it's not a secret anymore. Now you just have a bunch of people who feel they weren't important enough to know the news. They didn't perhaps hear it the way that you wanted to say it. They feel out of the loop. They don't feel on the inside, they feel on the outside. All of like the best thing you can do in a moment of change is to be honest and quickly. Like get in front of people quickly. This is what's happening. Here's why it's happening. I'm very excited about it. I don't know a bunch of things, but here are the people I've tapped to help us figure it out. And by the way, if any of you are interested, reach out to X, Y, and Z. If any of you are interested to learn more, to help out, but I think this is a good thing. And when I have more information, I'll share it. Like, as opposed to let's wait until a communication plan is perfect, you break trust that way. As soon as somebody finds out something and you didn't have the chance to say it directly, you know what I mean? It's okay to say, I don't have all the answers, but let me tell you what's going on because you guys matter and your opinions matter, you know? I've always had good success with being transparent and candid.
Okay, so I hear you and I want to agree with you, but sometimes I guess I've always been very transparent. I'm an open book, not particularly good poker player. But I guess flip side of that, there's advice from like Ben Horowitz of like, okay, he did this book, Hard Thing About Hard Things. It's excellent. But he does talk about essentially that there's things that you and not necessarily don't want to tell the team, but you need to kind of like sort of control the narrative. But also like for me, so let's pick a tactical example again. So let's say you're working on it and it falls through for whatever reason. Walk me through how in your strategy or in your comms suggestion you would go to that. I mean, you can go to, well, they wouldn't have been a good target anyway. So what do you do? I'm the GC or I'm the someone working with the project team in that scenario, or a big case settles, or a big case comes in, or something that's like, let's say, not good news. What
Yeah.
do you do?
So first of all, not everybody needs to know everything. So you have to figure out who the right audience is. And you do have to figure out what the right time is. My perspective is that most people miss that mark by days and days. Oh, that's okay. So that's two. I'd be faster to that than I would be longer. The third is you have to know who you are. Like I'm pretty synergistic and I like to talk things out loud, but I have a couple of deputies that I do that with, and they don't action what I'm saying. They understand that I'm trying to work things out. So I think it's important to surround yourself with people that you can talk to. And they're not just people who work for me, that some of them are other GCs, right? And say, this is what's going on in my mind, this is what I'm trying to work out. What do you think? And like more than half of the time, I sort of abandon that thought. I just needed to get it out. I needed to work it out and I needed it to be caught by somebody. I needed it to be received. But I am mindful, and I do agree with Ben Horowitz. I am mindful that like just because you have a message doesn't mean it's intended to be received by everybody. So you have to figure out what the right audience is. To your specific point, like how do you deliver bad news? I mean, the greatest example and the most relevant one is when a company needs to do layoffs. It's a hard question. I think the best you can do is be as human about it as possible. And when companies try to segment who they're giving that news to and think, the rest of the company won't find out, or I don't care if they find out in this way, I think that's wrong. I think when you get that message by text, I think that's wrong. I think it's unusual for somebody to go through life and never experience a layoff or a termination. And so we should all have the experience to show up and be human in that moment when we have to be on the other side of it. I think you deliver good news. I think you deliver bad news fast. You don't sugarcoat it, and you build trust by being transparent in that moment.
Love it. So I would categorize you as a modern general counsel or a modern trust officer. Clearly, like you've made strides, you've evolved a whole kind of profession, which is like, this is the first on this episode and among people I've encountered. So, what's different about the modern GC? So, you talked about trust, obviously. Other things in like, so you said effective and not right. That's just like an incredible North Star. Read a post yesterday that was saying a CEO was able to change legal when he literally said to the company or said to legal, like, hey, your job is not legal. Your job is to accelerate revenue safely. And that like three liner or whatever, or three word one liner was enough to make the change. Now that's obviously dramatic, but like what are the hallmarks that you want to see in the legal department of today?
Yeah, another really great question. Forever, I think I think legal advice has been paywalled. You need to know a lawyer, you need to pay a lawyer, to get legal advice. And I think the end of those days are here. So if you don't need to pay to understand what the law is, which by the way, I never actually thought you should have to do that, but I do think our profession was paywalled. What kinds of legal leader will be successful going forward? I think the kinds of legal leader that will be successful are the ones that are translators. Nobody can read these regulations, not even the people who write them. So you have to understand them and then translate it into what's the point. And what's the point will be different for who you're talking to. What's the point to you as a CEO? What is the point to the head of engineering? They will mean different things. I think it modernizes the legal profession in a way where we have been hesitant to let that happen, where other positions have had to modernize. Every executive role comes with their bag of tricks. The chief revenue officer generally has come with years of experience on compensation and commission planning and on customer relationship development. Those are some of the tools that they have to play with to be successful. Marketing has their tools, right? Finance has their tools. Legal needs to sharpen their tools now because anybody can GCAI a question and get a legal answer. I don't need to wait for my lawyer to call me back. How I apply that to this business and these people will be the secret sauce.
Wow. You've led governance, legal strategy, IPO readiness. Like you name the trick, you name the legal thing. Danielle has done it, and just like her wisdom is just like seeping off the page here. So what are the skills? Like, so when you talk about the bag of tricks, so we got to sharpen our skills. Let's say junior lawyer on your team, you're growing them. We've got our 80% advice. I love that. Is there any particular like skill that you think is like that people should be really deliberate about developing in legal?
The way I think Mark Twain said, wisdom is just a heck of a lot of experience in making mistakes. So
Okay.
appreciate it.
Yeah, let's
I
go.
have a mountain of mistakes behind me. I've been fortunate that people have allowed me to make those mistakes and bounce back. So I do have a young lawyer on my team. I rescued her from a big law firm, and she came with some really great skills. She saw me on a panel 6 years ago while she was in law school.
Wow.
And she followed up on LinkedIn and she's like, I thought you were great. I liked this part specifically. I'm in law school. I'd love to stay in touch. And some people will ignore that. I don't. I know you don't. We're big believers in mentoring the next generation. And so I wrote back and, I didn't really think about it after that. But every year, she either found a way to show up to a panel I was on, she found a way to comment on something she had seen me speak at, or she just wanted to say, hey. And 6 years later, I was looking to start bringing on a junior counsel, in-house counsel, who could manage SEC work and who could manage governance and who could help me be the connective tissue on the corporate sort of side of the house. And just luck and fate, she had happened to send me a note a couple weeks earlier and I hadn't responded to it, but it was in my mind because it's kind of remarkable when somebody stays in touch but doesn't ask for anything. And so I asked for her number on LinkedIn. I called her and I said, "What are you doing these days?" And she's like, "I'm at so and so firm in New York City." And I was like, "Are you ready to get out of there?" And she's just like, "Maybe. What did you have in mind?" And so I said, "Well, you have to take a massive pay cut, but you'll get equity and I'll teach you the ropes. This team would teach you the ropes." So she's like, "Okay, I'm interested in learning more." And we had her interviewed by 6, 7 people on the team. And 3 months later, she was on board. So I haven't answered your question yet, but what she had was initiative. What she had was patience, and she had a grace about her. I remember when we were much younger and people like to talk about how to find a mentor. You can't deliver your problems to somebody's doorstep. You have to make it worth their while. And I always thought it was lovely to hear from this woman. Her name is Gianna. I always thought it was lovely to hear from Gianna. And she didn't take up too much of my time. She didn't ask too much, but she made sure that she stayed appropriately present. And she let me follow her career. As now a full member of the team, she looks for ways to do that in the company. Who she is who she is. So she will reach out to people and she say, "I'd love to understand what you do here." And she's probably met 100 people in the company. And she's like, "It's really interesting because Joe over here does this. And in finance, we've got, Maggie who does this. And I feel like we've got, a procurement person who's always in the middle fighting. What do you think if I sort of put these people together?" And I was like, "Gianna, that's brilliant." But she's got the personality to want to solve problems, to want to remove obstacles, to want to be an enabler. And so I look for that. I just don't ask the question as if it's something on a resume. I look for it in a person's personality and how they've shown up over years. I have a team that I travel with for the most part. Many people have been with me. This is our third company, and we love to grow young talent. We love it. It's not always easy, right? Because it takes a while. We love to grow young talent. Probably the hardest thing for me to do was to hire people who were much more senior. And I learned how to do that in the last couple of years. And then to make this whole team work together as an ecosystem that can survive you. Like that's the goal.
It's incredible. Let's see. You've talked about psychological safety in the past. This, like, I mean, hearing that, I'm like, you're going to get a flood of applications to work for you, Danielle, because that, like, literally, I think what people are looking for as well. And then in this, like, patience, initiative, grace, putting people together, because that gets back to the AI point, actually, of like, AI wouldn't ask what Joe and Maggie are doing. It's just not a thing. And so thinking about the business value that creates, I'm assuming that, procurement improved X amount after that. And it's very difficult, I think, even quantify your resume. But that is, like you said, like a trait of like something that you've developed that if you put in your annual review, it's annual review season. Okay, I want to develop more initiative. It's like, okay, I'm gonna have XYZ lunches. I used to tell my team, plan on an external lunch once a week. At the end of the year, you're gonna have 50 people. And you're gonna cancel it, let's say holidays, whatever, but that's 25 connections, 10-year career, that's 250 people that care about you and what you're doing. And and that is inclusive inside the company and out. And so like now in the venture ecosystem as an example, like all the venture backed GCs, we're all sort of friends. We all kind of like can, and when things come up, we can talk. I just, yeah, sorry, I'm rambling, but like
That's great.
this is such gold. Anybody that's listening to this and wants to expand their career, do that. All right. So next thing, let's talk about psychological safety and like how do people in that moment when you're implementing your coach's advice, like I want to be effective, I don't need to be right. And how do you do this? Because there is a I think it is part of the lawyer personality that, so like typos, right? Like I literally like
Kids.
find them. I can't stand them. I find them and it's one of the things. And it just is like, but it does, there is this like broken window syndrome. They're like, all right, we sent out something with typos. We had at one of my companies, the CEO's name was not a standard spelling of that name. The one of the leaders of the company said the next document that comes to this person with the name misspelled is fired. And that did not go well, but it also is like it was pretty serious. So, like, what could the GC have done in that scenario?
Okay, psychological safety. To me, there's two ways to answer this question. The first is you have to tell people what it takes to feel safe with you. Cecilia, if I worked for you, I would hope that you would either tell me or I would ask you, how do I feel safe with you, Cecilia, on your team? What is it that you need? Right. So I've got a team of leaders and sometimes they flail. Sometimes I flail. Right. And when I am irritated or annoyed, I have to really think about why. And I try very hard to be like, what is bothering me? Because people are not all good or all bad. They're not all smart or all stupid, right? So what is really bothering me? And why don't these people feel safe with me, right? I just had a team meeting today and I said, there's some new folks on the team, some people who've worked for the company for over 15 years who have moved into leadership roles on the trust team, business development, and stuff like that, and security. And I said, let me tell you how you're successful with me. I am not going to tell you what your role is. You decide how you want to add value to the company. I will help you refine it. I will amplify it. I will help you resource it. I will help brand it. But if you're flailing because you don't know what the point of your life is, I am not your answer. You are leaders. You need to figure that out. I have to figure that out and tell the CEO what my role is, right? How am I going to add value today to him, to the company? I don't wait to be told. The job of a leader is not a battlefield promotion when done right. It is a really hard job because you are left with a blank sheet of paper and you have to figure out what you want to be known for. And you have to reinvent that every quarter and every year. So I get annoyed when my leaders are like, what am I supposed to be doing? I don't know. You tell me. And my executive coach,
That's exactly it. I love that. So, first of
yeah,
all, I'm calling your executive coach. My current one, got a gig, and they're amazing. She's very, very good. But I'm ready. So I'm working with this coach. But I love that of like this blank page because funny, I don't think I realized it before I became a CEO, but that's what a CEO is too. Because the company can be anything, like any of the 100 projects that you're working on, you can double down on. We're very lucky at GCI with strong product market fit. We could build deeper in commercial, deeper in regulatory, where we've got, a roadmap a mile long. But like, what are the things that we're going to focus on? And even down to like, what podcasts or webinars I do, right? It's like, how am I building the brand? How am I doing this? Like that blank page issue of like, yeah, no, this is like, man, I'm having so much fun.
Bezos had this quote that I loved, and I had it up on a wall for a long time. The job of a senior executive is to make a small number of high quality decisions. If you find that you are your own personal firing range of decisions and choices throughout the day, you're missing the point. Like, the point is, you set the direction, you set the vision, you set the budget, you set the communication tone, whatever it is that's important to you. And then you hire the best you can find, the best that you believe you can develop, and they're supposed to be part of the rising tide lifts all boats. But when you've got people on the team who are flailing, either they're the wrong fit or they need to hear this message, which is figure it out and come and tell me what you want to be known for. By the end of the year, what is it that you're going to accomplish? Just pick one thing because sometimes they need some confidence to believe that they can do it. So just get a couple points on the board. It doesn't even have to be huge. Just you need to prove to yourself again that you can accomplish something that matters. And then we'll go bigger and we'll go bigger. So one is, I like to coach that often, and people need to hear it, and I need to hear it all the time. Two is, if you had to identify it, what is your biggest need right now? And if somebody is not in a good place or is swirling, tell me an unmet need that you have. And it forces them to put words to what's going on with them.
Yes. Yes. I love that. All right. Book or podcast that changed the way you lead. Last question for the lightning round.
Book, and it's Nelson Mandela's Long Walk to Freedom. And the reason why is because he literally had to forgive people who did terrible things to him and his people in order to usher in a new era for South Africa. And I think that is just a story that I try to reduce into its simplest form of, don't assume bad intentions if you want to change the world. You have got to turn the page.
Danielle, you move through change with honesty, curiosity, clarity. If you could leave listeners with one thing in this episode, I mean, you've had like about 17 truth bombs. I'm literally gonna like print this out. But one thing you want to leave our listeners with.
I would think about something you're scared of. I was scared of AI. I was scared of what it meant for our profession. I was scared of what it meant for me as a leader, as a lawyer, and then figure out how to make it matter to you in your life. Just take that fear head on. I'm sure glad I did. I'm sure glad you founded the company you founded so that I had a.
You're the best. You're so kind. No, I am. At Replit, we had what? It's seek pain, and it as a leadership principle, and it is actually like lean into it. I think it's incredible advice, and I'm so glad. Like this was really lovely, Danielle. Thank you. I'm so delighted we had this conversation. So that was my conversation with Danielle Sheer. She's the Chief Trust Officer at Commvault and just an incredible leader who shows what it looks like to scale with integrity, with clarity, with humility, like all the words. Danielle is just an incredible inspiration. So follow CZ and Friends wherever you get your podcasts. You're going to learn about legal teams. You're going to get truth bombs on leadership and how to lead with impact. Visit gc.ai. We'll get you taken care of. If Danielle can kind of turn the page and be into AI, I think you can too. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.